I was rejected by my adoptive grandparents for years until my biological grandparents left me a massive fortune, allowing me to financially destroy my adoptive family's business when they crawled back begging for money. Here's how I got my complete revenge against the people who treated me like an outsider. For over 20 years, I was the invisible child. My adoptive parents loved me deeply, but my adoptive grandparents, my adoptive aunts, and my adoptive uncles made it clear I did not belong. At family reunions, my cousins received lavish gifts, while I received nothing. My grandfather always said inheritance belongs strictly to bloodlines, making sure I felt like a charity case. My grandmother would pass down family heirlooms to my cousins right in front of me, ensuring I knew my place as the outsider. That petty, bloodline-obsessed rule came back to haunt them in the most spectacular way possible. Last year, a high-profile estate lawyer contacted me out of nowhere. It turned out my biological grandparents had been searching for me for years before they passed away. They had no other heirs and left their entire massive estate to me. Overnight, I became the sole owner of a prime real estate portfolio, multiple commercial properties, and millions in cash. I went from being the cast-out grandchild to being wealthier than my entire adoptive extended family combined. Coincidentally, my adoptive grandfather's manufacturing business was rapidly collapsing. My adoptive uncles had horribly mismanaged the funds, and the company needed an immediate cash injection to survive bankruptcy. Suddenly, my grandmother called me for the first time in my life, inviting me to a fancy dinner. When I arrived, my aunts and uncles smiled warmly, pretending they hadn't spent 2 decades ignoring me. My cousins suddenly wanted to be my best friends. My grandfather cleared his throat, swallowed his pride, and asked if I could invest my new wealth into the family business, promising I would finally be treated as a true member of the family. I smiled, looked my grandfather dead in the eye, and said, no. But I didn't stop there. I wanted complete retribution. I used my new holding company to buy out their company's primary toxic debt note directly from their desperate bank. As their main creditor, I held all the cards. When the contractually mandated payment deadline arrived last month, I refused to grant them a single day of extension. When they inevitably defaulted, I legally foreclosed on the manufacturing facility, seized the corporate assets, and dissolved the entire company, selling the land to a residential developer. Because my grandfather and uncles had signed personal guarantees, the fallout was catastrophic. My grandparents lost their sprawling estate and were forced to downsize into a tiny rented apartment. My uncles lost their executive jobs, and my cousins lost their elite university trust funds. They finally learned exactly what it feels like to be completely excluded, humiliated, and left with absolutely nothing. Subscribe for more.